I should have known something was wrong the day my boss would not look me in the eye. People always think betrayal comes with shouting, slammed doors, some big dramatic scene where the villain finally shows their teeth, but most of the time it shows up quietly in a small office with bad fluorescent lighting, while someone folds their hands on the desk and tells you that things just are not working out. 6 months earlier, I'd walked into that same building thinking I had finally caught a break. The company was called Northbridge Home Services, a mid-sized property maintenance outfit outside Columbus, Ohio. The kind of place that fixed everything from apartment complex boilers to busted security gates, and I had been hired as an assistant operations manager, which sounded fancier than it felt because half my job was schedules, invoices, customer complaints, and grown men calling in sick on sunny Fridays. But I loved it. I really did. I had spent years bouncing between jobs where I was useful but invisible, always the person who cleaned up the mess without getting credit for it. And Northbridge felt different. The owner, Martin Kessler, was almost never around because he had 3 other businesses and apparently only slept in tax deductions. So the day-to-day operation was handled by a general manager named Tricia Boyd, a sharp woman with perfect nails, tight smile, and a talent for making every sentence sound like it came from a performance review. Tricia hired me, shook my hand, told me she needed someone dependable on first shift, and then handed me over to a senior manager named Marla Vance for training. Now Marla, at first, seemed harmless. She was in her late 40s, had that dry cigarette laugh even though she swore she had quit smoking years ago, and wore her seniority like a medal pinned to her shirt. She'd been with Northbridge for nearly 6 years, and she knew every vendor, every technician, every customer who paid late, and every little shortcut that kept the company from collapsing on a Monday morning. For the first few days, I actually liked her. She showed me how to handle emergency calls, how to calm down landlords who thought a leaking pipe was a personal attack, and how to talk to the field guys without sounding like I had just read a management book at the airport. She called me rookie, but in a teasing way, and I laughed because I thought that was how workplace friendships started. I did not realize it was a leash. By the end of my first month, I was handling most of my shift alone. By the 3rd month, I had cleaned up our scheduling board, cut down missed appointments, and found a stupid little billing error that had been bleeding money for who knows how long. Martin noticed that because money is the one language owners understand without needing subtitles, and he sent me a short email that said, "Good catch, keep pushing." I printed it out, not because I am sentimental, but because after years of being treated like background furniture, it felt nice to have proof that I was actually good at something. That was when Marla changed. Not all at once, not enough for me to call it out without sounding paranoid, but slowly like a room getting colder after somebody cracks a window. She stopped calling me rookie. She started correcting me in front of technicians over things that did not matter, like whether I said server's window or appointment block. If I suggested a new way to organize calls, she would smile and say, "That is cute, but we have been doing this a long time." If a customer complimented me, Marla would somehow drift into the conversation and remind everyone that she trained me. At first, I brushed it off. I told myself she was protective of her territory, and honestly, I understood that. In places like Northbridge, people do not just work jobs, they build little kingdoms. And every spreadsheet, every key, every vendor contact becomes part of the castle wall. I was the new guy who had accidentally moved a few stones, and maybe that made her nervous. So I stayed polite. I thanked her when she corrected me. I let the little comment slide. I even brought donuts one Friday because apparently I thought sugar could fix insecurity. It could not. The first real warning came from one of our dispatchers, a college kid named Benny, who always looked like he had slept in his hoodie. He caught me in the break room one afternoon and said, "Hey, just so you know, Marla has been talking about you upstairs." I laughed because I thought he meant gossip, office nonsense. Maybe she was annoyed I changed the supply order form. But Benny did not laugh. He just stirred his gas station coffee and said, "No, man. I mean, she's been saying you are careless, saying you do not listen, saying you act like you run the place." I remember standing there with the refrigerator humming behind me, holding a paper plate with half a donut on it, feeling this weird heat crawl up my neck. I asked him if Tricia knew. Benny gave me the kind of look people give when they are trying not to say something that everyone already knows. That was when I learned Marla and Tricia were not just friendly co-workers. They had worked together at another company for almost a decade before Northbridge. They vacationed together. Their husbands watched football together. Their kids had grown up in the same dance recitals and school fundraisers. And me, like an idiot, had been walking around thinking the chain of command was written on an org chart, when really it was written in old favors, inside jokes, and Sunday barbecue invitations. Still, I tried to stay calm. I kept notes on my work. I saved emails. I made sure every scheduled change had a timestamp. I figured if I kept doing a good job, the numbers would speak for themselves. That is another lie people tell themselves at work. Numbers speak, sure, but only if the right person is willing to listen. And Tricia was not. The meeting happened on a Wednesday, right after lunch, which felt cruel because I just bought a chicken wrap I never got to finish. Tricia called me into her office, closed the door halfway, not all the way, just enough to make it feel official but not private. And Marla was not there, which somehow made it worse. Tricia sat behind a desk with a folder in front of her, my name written on the tab in blue ink. She gave me that tight little smile and said, "Aaron, we need to talk about fit. Fit. That word is a loaded gun in khakis." She said there had been ongoing concerns about my judgment, my accuracy, my attitude with senior staff. I asked for examples because my voice was still calm then, even though my stomach had already dropped through the floor. She mentioned the late vendor confirmation from 2 months earlier that had actually been Marla handling the vendor that day. She mentioned a customer complaint I had resolved, then twisted it like I had caused it. She mentioned that I seemed resistant to coaching, which was funny because apparently coaching now meant letting Marla talk to me like I had been assembled incorrectly. I pushed back. I had dates, emails, notes. Tricia barely looked at them. She kept nodding in that dead-eyed corporate way, like she was waiting for me to run out of dignity. Then she said, "This decision has already been made." I remember staring at her, then at that folder, then a little framed quote on her wall that said, "Integrity is doing the right thing when no one is watching." I almost laughed. Instead, I asked if Martin knew. For the first time, her face moved. Just a flicker. She said Martin supported management decisions. That was it. 6 months of work, late nights, saved money, improved numbers, gone in 15 minutes because someone with more history than me had decided I was a threat. I packed my desk in a cardboard parts box while Benny watched from dispatch with this helpless look on his face. Marla walked by once, slow enough for me to see her, not slow enough to be obvious, and she gave me the smallest smile I have ever seen in my life. Not a happy smile, a winning smile, a winning smile. I carried that box to my truck, sat behind the wheel, and for a minute I just listened to the keys shake in my hand. I was embarrassed, furious, and scared in that very adult way where rage has to share space with rent, groceries, and the fact that your life can be rearranged by people who lie better than you defend yourself. I could have driven home. I could have swallowed it. I could have told myself karma would handle it someday. But karma, in my experience, has terrible office hours. So I opened my laptop right there in the parking lot, connected to the weak guest Wi-Fi still leaking from the building, and started looking into Marla Vance. I did not know what I expected to find. Maybe an old complaint, maybe another job where she had pulled the same thing, maybe nothing at all. For the first 30 minutes it was boring. Facebook photos, charity raffles, smiling pictures with Tricia at some lake house. A comment about wine o'clock that had aged poorly in ways I did not understand yet. Then I found a county records page from Indiana, just across the state line, and there it was, buried in plain sight under a name she probably thought nobody at work would search. Marla Jane Vance, arrested 3 months earlier, operating while intoxicated. Court date pending. And the second I saw the charge, I stopped breathing because at Northbridge, managers like us were required to carry a state contractor compliance credential, and any criminal charge involving impaired driving had to be reported immediately. She had not reported it. Tricia either did not know, or worse, had helped hide it. I sat there in my truck, with my stupid box of desk junk on the passenger seat, and for the first time all day, I smiled. I smiled, and I hated that I smiled, because I am not proud of what I felt in that moment. It was not noble. It was not calm. It was not one of those clean movie moments where the hero discovers the truth and suddenly the music swells. It was uglier than that. It was relief, anger, fear, and this sharp little spark of satisfaction all twisted together in my chest, because for the first time since Tricia had slid that folder across her desk, I was not just the guy who got pushed out. I had something. I had a loose thread, and Marla had been careless enough to leave it hanging in public records. I sat in that parking lot for another 20 minutes reading everything twice, then 3 times, because I knew if I acted too fast to get one detail wrong, they would paint me as bitter. Disgruntled former employee, that is what they call you when you tell the truth too loudly after they fire you. So I took screenshots. I saved the docket number. I found the county clerk page, the upcoming hearing date, the charge, the arrest date, and then I pulled up the compliance credential rules from our own state board. There it was, plain as day. Any management-level credential holder had to report criminal charges related to alcohol, controlled substances, fraud, theft, or public safety within 10 business days. Failure to report could lead to suspension. I stared at those words until they stopped being words and became a door. I did not call Martin right away. I drove home first because I needed to be somewhere my hands would stop shaking. My wife, Claire, was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in, grading spelling quizzes because she taught 4th grade and somehow had more patience than any person alive. She looked up, saw the cardboard box in my arms, and her face changed before I said anything. That is the thing about people who really know you. They do not need the headline. They can read the weather. I told her everything while standing in the kitchen like an idiot, still holding a coffee mug, a photo frame, 2 pens, and a half-empty bottle of antacids from my desk. When I got to the part about Marda, Claire did not say, "Call him." She did not say, "Destroy her." She just said, "Sit down first." That is why I married her. She had this way of making sure I did not mistake momentum for judgment. So I sat down, and we went through the records together. She asked the questions I did not want to ask. Are you sure it is her? Are you sure this matters to the job? Are you sure this matters to the job? Are you sure Martin does not already know? Are you sure this will not make you look like you are retaliating? The answer to the last one was no. It absolutely would look like retaliation, because it was retaliation. But it was also true. That was the difference I kept coming back to. I was not inventing a story. I was not exaggerating some rumor. I was holding up the thing she had hidden while she helped bury me under lies. Around 6 that evening, I called Martin Kessler. I expected voicemail, because Martin was the kind of owner who appeared in the office like a weather event, brief, expensive, and usually followed by paperwork. But he answered on the 3rd ring, sounding distracted like he was walking through a warehouse. I said, "Martin, it is Aaron Miles." There was a pause, not cold, just cautious. He said, "Aaron, I heard about today. I am sorry it did not work out." That sentence almost made me hang up. It did not work out. Like I was a microwave. Someone returned to Costco. I took a breath and said, "I understand Tricia made her decision, but I think you need to know something before you let that decision stand as fact." He got quieter. Owners always get quieter when they hear the word need. I told him I had reason to believe Marla Vance had been charged with operating while intoxicated in Indiana and had not reported it to the credentialing board, even though our management roles required it. I told him the arrest was 3 months old, the hearing was coming up, and the record was public. I offered to email everything. For a few seconds, all I heard was air and some distant machine beeping on his end. Then he said, "Marla told us she had a family emergency back in March." I did not say anything. I let that sit there because sometimes silence is the most useful thing in a conversation. Martin asked me to send the documents. I did. Screenshots, links, the rule, the docket, everything organized like I was building a case file instead of trying to save what was left of my pride. He said he would look into it and call me in the morning. I barely slept. I lay there staring at the ceiling while Claire breathed softly beside me, and my mind kept replaying every little moment I had ignored, every time Marla corrected me in front of people, every time Tricia smiled like she was doing me a favor by letting me speak. By sunrise, I was convinced I had either blown up my life even worse or accidentally stepped into the only leverage I would ever get. Martin called at 8:13. I remember the exact time because my phone lit up while I was pouring coffee, and my hand jerked so hard I spilled half of it on the counter. His voice was not warm, but it was different. Controlled. Angry, but not at me. He said, "Aaron, I need you to come in at 10 if you are willing." I asked why. He said, "I am meeting with Tricia and Marla at 9. I would like to talk afterward." That was all he gave me. No promise, no explanation. Just come in if you are willing. The old version of me might have said no out of pride. The smarter version knew pride did not pay rent. So I put on the same navy button-down I had worn the day I got hired, because sometimes you have to dress for the version of yourself you are trying to get back, and I drove to Northbridge with my stomach in knots. I parked across the street instead of in the employee lot, partly because I did not know if I was allowed there anymore, partly because I wanted a minute to watch the building from a distance. At 9:40, I saw Marla come out the side door. She was not crying. Not yet. She was furious. She moved fast, foam pressed to her ear, sunglasses on even though it was cloudy, and Tricia followed 2 steps behind her, one hand raised like she was trying to calm down a dog that had slipped its collar. Marla turned back and said something I could not hear, but her face was red and Tricia looked smaller than I had ever seen her. That sight should have satisfied me more than it did. Instead, what I felt was strange. Heavy. Because revenge sounds clean when you imagine it, but when it starts happening in real time, you remember everybody involved is still a person. Even the ones who treated you like an obstacle. I did not feel sorry for Marla. Not exactly, but I did feel the weight of what was unfolding. She had tried to take food off my table because she was jealous. Now her own secret was doing the same to her. At 10, Martin met me in the front lobby himself. That had never happened before. Usually he passed through like a man late for a flight, but this time he opened the door, shook my hand and said, "Come with me." His office was on the 2nd floor, a room I had only been inside twice. Tricia was already there, sitting stiffly in a chair near the window. Her perfect nails were wrapped around a paper cup of water, and for once she did not smile. Martin sat behind his desk and did not waste time. He said Marla had failed to disclose the charge, and because of the nature of our contracts, the credential issue created risk for the company. She had been suspended immediately, pending review, and by noon, after speaking with counsel, her employment would be terminated. Tricia stared at the carpet. Martin then turned to me and said something I did not expect. He said, "I owe you an apology. Not the fake kind either. Not the corporate sorry you feel that way garbage." He said he had relied too heavily on Tricia, and Tricia had relied too heavily on Marla, and the concerns used against me were either unsupported, exaggerated, or connected to issues that had not been investigated properly. My throat tightened in a way that annoyed me because I had promised myself I would not get emotional in that room. I asked him if that meant my termination was being reversed. Martin leaned back, rubbed his face, and said, "If you are willing, I would like you back immediately. Same seniority, back pay for the days missed, and Marla's management slot is now open. I want you in it." Tricia's head snapped up at that, and I saw it. Just for a second, the panic of someone realizing the person she helped push out might now outrank the story she told about him. I asked what would happen with her. Martin did not look away from me. He said Tricia would remain for now, that her authority over personnel decisions would be limited until he completed a full review. It was not the total collapse I wanted in my angriest moments, but real life rarely hands you a perfect ending on the first try. Sometimes it hands you a door, and you decide whether to walk through it. I thought about Claire at the kitchen table. I thought about the box in my truck. I thought about Marla's little winning smile as I packed my desk. Then I said yes. Martin nodded, almost relieved, and told me to come in the next morning at 7:30 to meet with him before opening. He wanted to reset the team, stabilize the schedule, and make sure customers did not feel the internal mess. That was such an owner thing to say, like a building could be on fire as long as the invoices still went out on time. But I understood. Work had to keep moving. As I stood to leave, Tricia finally spoke. She said, "Aaron, for what it is worth, I did not know about the charge." Her voice was soft, careful, and maybe she was telling the truth. Oh, maybe Marla had fooled her too. Or maybe she was telling the truth. Maybe Marla had fooled her too. Or maybe she was saving herself. I looked at her for a moment and said, "For what it is worth, you did not need to know about the charge. To know you should have checked the accusations before firing me." She flinched like I had slapped the cup out of her hand. I left before she could answer because I did not trust myself to keep being that measured. Outside, the air smelled like rain, and for the first time in 24 hours I could breathe without feeling like my ribs were locked. I called Claire from the parking lot. When I told her I had my job back, and Marla's position too, she laughed once, short and surprised, then went quiet. She said, "Are you okay?" That question nearly broke me more than the firing had. I said, "I think so." Then I looked back at the Northbridge building, at the glass doors, at the second-floor window where Tricia was probably still sitting with her paper cup, and I said, "But I do not think this is over." I was right, because the next morning I arrived an hour before opening, thinking the worst part had already happened, and that was when Marla walked back through the front door. Marla walked back through the front door like a woman who had convinced herself that if she acted normal enough, the universe might get embarrassed and put everything back the way it was. She had on the same black blazer she wore whenever vendors came in, the one with the little silver pin on the lapel, and her hair was pulled tight enough to make her face look sharper than usual. For 1 second, I thought maybe she had forgotten something, maybe keys, maybe paperwork, maybe whatever dignity she had left in her desk drawer. But then I saw her eyes moving across the lobby looking for Martin, not for me. She did not know I was there yet. I was standing behind the half wall near dispatch, holding a stack of work orders Martin had asked me to review, and Benny was at his station, suddenly very interested in his monitor. The front door chimed behind her, that cheerful little bell we used to hear 100 times a day, and somehow in that moment it sounded like a judge tapping a gavel. Martin came out of the hallway first. He looked tired, older than he had the day before, like he had spent the night realizing how expensive blind trust could be. He said, "Marla, you cannot be here right now." His voice was calm, but there was iron under it. Marla laughed, one of those brittle laughs people use when they are 2 inches from falling apart. She said, "Martin, come on, we need to talk like adults. I've given this place 6 years. 6 years! You cannot just throw me out because some jealous little nobody went digging through my personal life." And there it was. Not shame, not accountability, not even fear yet, just rage that I had dared to find the door she forgot to lock. Martin told her the issue was not her personal life, it was her failure to report a charge that directly affected her credentials and the company contracts. Marla waved her hand like rules were mosquitoes. She said, "It is a misunderstanding. The whole thing will be dismissed." Tricia knows that. Tricia said I should wait until the hearing. That sentence landed so hard, the air changed. Benny stopped pretending to type. Martin's face went still. From the hallway, Tricia appeared like she had been summoned by guilt itself. She looked at Marla, then at Martin, and in that tiny pause, I understood that some secrets do not explode all at once. They crack the room open one person at a time. Martin turned to Tricia and said, "Is that true?" Tricia opened her mouth, closed it, then said, "I told her to speak with an attorney." That was not an answer, and everybody in the lobby knew it. Marla's face shifted then, because she realized she had not saved herself. She had dragged Tricia closer to the cliff. She looked around, desperate now, and finally her eyes found me. I will never forget her expression. It was not just surprise, it was insult. Like seeing me standing there holding her old morning schedule, alive and employed and breathing her office air, offended her on some spiritual level. She said, "What is he doing here?" Martin said, "Aaron is back." Marla blinked twice. "Back as what?" Martin did not hesitate. "Operations manager." Her mouth opened a little, and for the first time since I had known her, Marla Vance had nothing ready to say. I wish I could tell you I took the high road completely. I wish I just nodded respectfully and let silence do the work. But I am human, and I had spent the previous day carrying my career out in a cardboard box, while she smiled at me like she had won a raffle. So I walked around the half wall, slow, not dramatic, just steady, and I said, "Morning, Marla." She stared at me like I had crawled out of a grave. I kept my voice light, almost friendly, because sometimes kindness with sharp edges cuts deeper than yelling. I said I would stay and catch up, but I have a 7:30 meeting with Martin, and after that I need to fix the schedule you left behind. Her eyes filled with tears, then angry tears, the kind that do not soften a person, they just make them look more dangerous. She said, "You think you were better than me?" I said, "No, I think I reported facts. You reported stories. There is a difference." That was when she really broke. Not screaming, not throwing things, nothing that would make a perfect movie trailer. Just this quiet collapse in the middle of the lobby. She turned to Martin and begged. She said she had bills. She said her husband would leave. She said the charge was not fair. She said she had protected the company for years. Maybe some of that was true. Life is messy like that. People can be useful and cruel at the same time. They can work hard Monday through Friday and still ruin somebody on Wednesday afternoon because their ego got bruised. Martin listened longer than I expected, then said, "Marla, you should go home. HR will send the documents. She stood there for a few more seconds, looking at all of us, waiting for someone to rescue her from the consequences she had helped build. Nobody moved. When she turned to leave, she passed close enough that I could smell her perfume, something floral and expensive, completely wrong for that ugly little lobby. At the door, she paused and looked back at me. I could tell she wanted to say something final, something poisonous enough to leave a mark. Before she could, I said, "Good luck on the 19th, her court date." Her face went pale so fast even Benny looked away. Then she walked out, and the bell chimed again, cheerful as ever, like nothing important had happened. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Martin rubbed his forehead. Trisha disappeared down the hall. Benny finally whispered, "Dude, that was ice cold." I told him to get back to work, but I was smiling when I said it. The next few months were not some fantasy where everyone clapped and I became a legend. Work was still work. Customers still complained. Trucks still broke down. Technicians still lied about traffic. But I was good at that job, and now I had room to prove it. I rebuilt the schedule, negotiated 2 vendor contracts, caught another billing leak, and created a callback system that kept small problems from becoming refund disasters. Martin noticed. More importantly, the staff noticed, not because I walked around acting like a king, but because I did the thing Marlon never could. I gave people credit when they earned it and corrected them privately when they needed it. Trisha stayed for 2 more months, quiet and careful, then resigned after Martin finished his review. Officially, she left for a new opportunity. Unofficially, everybody knew the old protection network had finally burned down. As for Marla, I heard bits and pieces. Her credential was suspended pending the outcome of the case. She tried to get hired at a competitor, but the industry is smaller than people think when paperwork is involved. One afternoon, almost 4 months later, my phone rang from a blocked number. I answered because I was expecting a vendor. It was Marla. At first, she did not speak, just breathed into the line, and then she said my name in this broken little voice I barely recognized. She said she was sorry. She said she had been scared I was taking her place. She said Trisha had made it easy to blame me. She said she never thought I would actually lose everything. That last part almost made me laugh, because people love to destroy you in theory, then act shocked when the damage becomes real. I told her I accepted the apology, but I was not the person she needed forgiveness from. She needed to figure out why another person's success felt like a threat to her survival. She cried harder then, and for 1 second I felt the old version of me wanting to comfort her. Then I remembered the cardboard box. I remembered her smile. I remembered sitting in my truck wondering how I was going to tell my wife I had been fired. So I said, "Marla, I hope you get your life together. I really do, but do not ever confuse my peace with permission to come back into it." Then I hung up. And that was the end of it, at least for me. I know some people will say I went too far, that losing her job over a mistake in her personal life was too harsh, that I should have walked away once I was fired and let time handle it. Maybe they are right. Maybe I did enjoy it more than I should have. But here is what I keep coming back to. She did not just make a mistake. She tried to turn me into one. She used friendship, seniority, and a manager who trusted her to push me out of a job I had earned, then expected me to disappear quietly because people like her count on silence. So I want to know what you think. Was I wrong for digging into her past after she got me fired, or was that just the bill coming due after she tried to ruin my future? Drop your opinion in the comments, because I promise you, there are 2 kinds of people in this story. The ones who think revenge is petty, and the ones who have been cornered long enough to understand why justice sometimes needs a little push. And if you have ever worked with someone who smiled in your face while sharpening the knife behind your back, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you would have done if you were standing in that lobby when the door chimed.